How can we as a friend help someone that is having suicidal thoughts and almost committed suicide? She's a Christian. And when that friend doesn't live too close to us either. I did talk a little bit about helping a friend who is discouraged in another question and answer. But I'm going to take a little bit of a different route in this, although that is helpful. But the first thing is I would take it seriously. But don't carry it as your responsibility to stop her. Because every person has free will, and we are accountable to God for what we do, but we are not accountable to God for what they do. So yes, take it seriously and talk to her. Number 2, encourage her to share her thoughts in a judgment-free zone. A lot of people are ashamed to say that they're having suicidal thoughts because they're afraid that they're going to be looked at as crazy or selfish or mentally unstable. But I truly believe that suicidal thoughts are very often one of the fiery darts of Satan. And he loves the tool of discouragement and hopelessness. And if he can get somebody to take their own life, if he can provoke somebody to destroy themselves in any way, he will. So I would truly be judgment-free when somebody's having those struggles. Many times they just feel hopeless, and death seems to them like a logical and a caring choice even sometimes for the people that they feel they're a burden to. You know, like if I wasn't around, then my husband wouldn't have to deal with me in the way that I feel all the time. If I wasn't around, then my parents, maybe they could even consider it a blessing that they won't have a daughter who's going to struggle the rest of their life. It's often logical, while somebody on the outside might look and say, but they have this and this and this and this and this. Why would they get to that point? For them, they've been battling a secret battle for a long time. So I can't stress how much that our battlefield is in our mind. It has nothing to do with our circumstances, because we can have the best circumstances and the greatest struggle in our head, or we can have horrible circumstances and have joy, all because of our relationship. It's the spiritual, it's the invisible relationship with God that helps sustain us. So number 3, encourage her to remember that God has a hope and a purpose for her life, and that he is the giver and taker of life. If you are still alive, God has a reason for it. And with that in mind, I think about the verse that says that we are to be a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is a reasonable service. And in Psalm 118, verse 17, it says, I shall not die, but live and declare the works of the Lord. And I try to tell people this, that sometimes just living is the sacrifice that pleases the Lord. We are created to bring him pleasure. And he says that it's a reasonable service to live, and it pleases him. When all else is failing, it pleases him that you are a living sacrifice. Number 4, sleep, eat, nourish yourself, because the task is heavy. A lot of times we get into that hopeless state because we haven't been nourishing ourselves properly, with proper nutrition, with proper rest, with proper stress management. We get bound up in our minds, and even when we're sleeping, we're not resting. And I think about Elijah in the cave and how he came back after that big, tremendous victory. He came back and was so despondent that he wished he could just die. And he was jealous for the Lord. He had so many good reasons, but it was just too much. And God said, you know what? Here's some food. And then he said, here's some more food. He said, rest a little while. The path is too heavy for you. And he gave him about 6 months of respite. And then he said, Elijah, I have a job for you. So don't think that God is a heavy taskmaster. And number 5, we think about Jeremiah. And sometimes, and I'm going through these so that you can have empathy And so you can encourage them, letting them know that people have gone before, and this is how God comforted their soul. Jeremiah, he said he wished he had never been born. He wished he had died in the womb. And this is because he felt like he had nothing to offer the world that would make a difference. And yet God used him, and he even got stuck in a prison. They didn't even change their decisions. Israel was just so hard-hearted. But God used him to just stand and be a light for God's own glory and for his own testament that he reached out mercifully and tried to help the people. And then Jonah. Sometimes we want to die because the load of bitterness has taken over our thought life. And Jonah was certainly bitter against the people of Nineveh, and we don't know his battle, we don't know his history. But he was just despondent at the thought that somebody who didn't deserve grace and mercy was going to have it. And he was wallowing in self-pity and victimhood. And when we are not able to choose to forgive, and I know that I talked about forgiveness on a YouTube video. I think that I talked about it in the question and answers. But forgiveness is a really big deal, especially for people when the people don't deserve the forgiveness. But we have to forgive because God commanded us to, and we're not living for those other people. We're living for the pleasure of God. And number 7, in every case that I just listed, Elijah, Jeremiah, Jonah, God had a job for them. God has a purpose for every person's life. Don't give up hope. Don't encourage them to not give up hope. To feel that they're such a burden is not true, because to God they are not a burden. He has a reason, and Satan's just trying to provoke them to destroy God's purpose for their life. And focus on God's loving kindness and mercy and his pleasure, not at the people that you feel you're disappointing, people that you feel that you're failing, the battle you feel you're never going to overcome. If we look to God and he remembers that our frame is but dust, he knows the battle we're climbing. And to be a living sacrifice as we're climbing that mountain pleases the Lord. So don't give up. Look in his eyes. His yoke is easy. He loves you. You are a life worth living to him.